Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? Question Jesus asked of the lawyer. And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go and do thou likewise. It seems odd that Jesus would say that God has hidden the truth of the gospel and the identity of Jesus as the Son of God from wise and intelligent people and revealed them to people not so intelligent. What do you make of that? I think perhaps we need to put this in perspective. Jesus is not belittling intelligence. He created people with it. He's rather attacking and exposing how people use what they have. People who maybe are a bit more intelligent, a little higher on the IQ scale, may be inclined to become prideful. I know that I know more than you. And if you'll talk with me a little bit, I'll make sure you know that I know more than you. In almost 70 years, I've known a very few preachers who were infected with that problem just a little bit. The Lord, and I've seen, by the way, more than average intelligent preachers who were humble and touched by grace and used whatever the Lord gave them for His glory. It's not raw IQ or intelligence the Lord is belittling. It's what you do with what you have. It's an attitude of, I know more, I have more understanding. Verse 22 is an amazing verse. We find it in some of the other Gospels as well, almost word for word. All things are delivered to me of my Father. Whatever Jesus needed to do the work He came to do, to save His people from their sins, to teach His disciples how to live because of His saving grace, the Father gave Him everything He needed. Sometimes preachers will depict God as a rather aloof, cold, remote, distant personality, and Jesus is pleading and begging and negotiating with the Father to show a little mercy. That is not the biblical description. What Jesus is teaching here, pardon me, is that the Father and the Son are intimately agreed on every detail of His work while He was here on earth. And then Jesus takes this intimacy an incredible step deeper into the question. And no man knoweth who the Son, what's the next word? I S. But the Father, and who the Father is, but the Son. Jesus is now not talking about things that are hidden and revealed. He is talking about the intimate, personal knowledge the Father and the Son have of each other. You could look at it, you could pick up a history book, and you could read of some famous character in history. I've always had an affinity for ancient Rome. I could pick up a book. Will Durant's Story of Civilization has a whole book on the history of the Roman Empire. Caesar and Christ is the title. I could learn a lot about Julius Caesar. But I don't know who Julius Caesar was. But I've known Barry since he was 7 years old. I've known Tyler for several years now. I've known Matt for several years. I know who these men are. I know a little about Caesar, but I don't know who Caesar was. There's intimacy in what Jesus is describing here. The Father and the Son are in perfect harmony. And so the Father knows everything the Son is, and the Son knows everything the Father is. But he introduces this by saying, no man knows. And then concludes the thought. The Father knows the Son knows the Father, and he to whom the Son will reveal him. A person may pick up his Bible and learn things about Jesus. That's not intimate personal knowledge. It takes a divine act that changes the heart and implants the life of God within the heart and takes that person from being a convicted criminal before a holy God to being a beloved child in the family of God with all of his sins washed and put away by what Jesus has done. When you've had that intimacy, you begin to know him. In Jeremiah 31, God talked about, in Revelation to Jeremiah, a new covenant that would take place at a certain time in the future. Twice in the book of Hebrews, Paul makes brief reference to this event, making the point that the new covenant occurred when Jesus came. Now, I've heard people preach very sincerely, pardon me, that this new covenant is salvation. God never needed a new covenant for saving sinners. The original covenant has always worked exactly the way it needed to work. This is a new covenant of worship. We don't worship God the way people did in synagogues and in the temple before Jesus came. That's what this is talking about. Under the Old Testament, there were courts for different classes of people. There was even a court for Gentiles. They could only go to the temple in that court. If a man professed or wanted to be a priest, he had to produce his ancestry, his family tree, proving that he belonged to the family of Levi. Well, what qualifies someone to participate in the worship of God under this new covenant? I'll put my laws in their minds, write them in their hearts. I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, know the Lord. You hear a lot of preaching today that says they want to get you to do just that. But Jesus says, and the covenant says, nobody can do that. For they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them. The qualification to participate in the covenant of worship today is the fact that God has written His law in your heart and you know Him. God doesn't judge your dialect. He doesn't judge the color of your skin. He doesn't judge the hair you wear or you don't have on your head. God judges what He has already planted in the heart. You have that life and knowledge implanted in your heart. Welcome to a place where forgiven sinners shake hands with forgiven sinners and say, welcome, friend, we're all saved by grace. In verses 23 and 24, Jesus reminds the disciples, your eyes are supremely blessed. You have seen something because you saw me and you heard me, that people in all the ages past have longed to look into, and they couldn't see them, but you can and you have. Blessed, supremely blessed and happy are you. Oh, this is all good news. It's all encouraging. It's all upbeat. And the lawyer comes along and asks, first of all, an illogical question. What shall I do to inherit eternal life? Can you do something to inherit a person's estate? If you can, tell me what I can do to inherit Jeff Bezos' estate. I want to get in line. He's gotten enough of my money when I've ordered from Amazon. I want to inherit his. You can't, can you? An inheritance is based on, number one, your name appearing in the will of someone who died. And that most typically is family members. It's not based on me wanting to get into the will. It's based on the person writing the will choosing to include whom he chooses to include in his estate. The guy's a lawyer, but he doesn't ask a lawyerly question. Jesus knows what's in his mind. Jesus understands the character of the question. And Jesus says, okay, you want to go that way with it? You have to keep all of Moses' law. What does the law say? Can anyone here say you have kept the 10 Commandments all of your life? I can't. Don't think you can either. That means if this is a salvation passage, then if you haven't kept the law of Moses beginning to end, the 10 Commandments beginning to end, you can't be saved. You really want this to be a salvation text? It says way too much. Heaven's going to be very sparsely populated if this is a salvation text. What Jesus is doing is answering the man according to his own thinking and trying to get him to realize there's something bigger here than himself and his own opinion. And Jesus takes it right down to the end. Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. Leaving the man perplexed and realizing that Leviticus took the 10 Commandments and summarized them to 2. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. That's the first 4 of the 10 Commandments. They relate to God. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the remaining 6 of the 10 Commandments. Ooh, the man now begins to understand what his trouble is and how big the problem is. Okay, who is my neighbor? If I have to practice six commandments. Sorry, six commandments. Anyone in my circle of acquaintances or out that I come in contact with is my neighbor, and I have to practice those moral traits in my interaction with those people. Who is my neighbor? Can I be selective and say, you're my neighbor, but you're not? Can I say, you're my neighbor, but you're not? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus gives him the Good Samaritan story. If a man goes from Jerusalem down to Jericho, he's probably a Jewish man who's been to Jerusalem in worship. The road from Jerusalem down to Jericho was a rather rugged path, winding rocks and boulders, and there were places all along the way for thieves to hide, and they often did, so that a lonely traveler walking this path would be vulnerable to being robbed and beaten. That's what happened to this man. I won't quibble over what it means that they left him half dead. He's half alive and half dead. What does that mean? He's not in good shape. We can all agree on that for sure. They thought he was probably dead. And then he's lying here beaten and bloodied and with barely a stitch of clothing by the side of the road. Priest, a wise and prudent man in Jewish religion and worship, comes by. He sees the man. Jesus doesn't leave that out, but he walks by on the other side and keeps going. A Levite, an expert in the study of Mosaic law, passes by. He sees the man. He does the same thing. And then this lowly, despised, despicable Samaritan happens to come along. He sees the man. He has compassion on him. He patches him up in the field as best he can, puts him on his own beast of burden, and walks leading his beast of burden to the nearest inn, hotel. And he says, here's this man, I'm going to take care of him overnight, and when I leave, here's some money. You take care of him till I get back, and if you need more money, when I get back, I'll pay you. But you take care of this man. He's in need, and we need to help him. And then Jesus turns to this man. Which one of these three, the priest, the Levite, or the Samaritan, was the neighbor? Oh. As we look around in our culture today, you know anyone that you would think of like the Jews thought of this Samaritan? Our political climate today, you don't believe the way I do, and you don't have allegiance to the same political party, you're worthless scum. That sounds like Jews and Samaritans, doesn't it? I remember my dad talking with people of different political opinions. They'd visit, they'd chat. They'd first say, how are you doing? How's the family? How's the crop this year? You're going to have a good harvest this fall? What do you think about the latest politics? They'd have a casual, friendly, gracious conversation. When they finished, they'd shake hands, wish each other well, and go on their way. It's hard to find someone like that today. Samaritans and Jews hating each other and pouring out more hatred. Our country fought a war to try to end some things that weren't ended. It almost seems like today it's getting worse, not better. Are we talking about Jews and Samaritans here? I don't know. It's been decades ago. our country passed a law that said employers could not discriminate against someone because of their age. If you're 59 or 60 years old, fill out your resume and apply for a job. You think you're going to get hired? No, you don't think so. We had a member of our church here years and years ago, Charlie Hayes, who had that very experience. He was an engineer for one of the most advanced companies in Southern California, JPL in Pasadena. He worked on one of those outer space probes. That's the quality of his intellect. He got older, and they said, "We don't need you anymore." Talk about a resume this man had. He couldn't find a job. You know what he did? He got a job delivering auto parts from the wholesaler to the dealer. Shame on us. We're still playing Samaritans and Jews, aren't we? But that Samaritan stood above, rose above all of the things that he had learned in his culture and been taught, and all he could think of, I'm a human being, and here's a human being who's hurting and in need. Can I help? And he pauses his journey. He does everything in his power to help this poor man, even foots the bill for the rent at the hotel and the care the hotel keeper will give the man in his absence. He was Jesus' definition